So we're going to start off with the equation x minus y equals 3. So the goal is we want to set it into this form. So the goal is to set it into y equals mx plus b. Okay, so we're going to move things around. We want to get this y by itself, and we want to move the x over to the other side. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to subtract x from both sides. So I'm going to subtract x from here, and then I'm also going to move it over here as well. So I'm going to do minus x on both sides. So this positive x and this negative x cancel out, and then I'm going to bring down the negative y. So now I have negative y equals 3 minus x. Now if you notice, we want to get the x in the front and a number in the back, so we're going to have to flip that around. So we have to be careful to remember that the 3 is a positive 3. So I'm going to switch it around, so it's now negative y equals negative x plus 3. Okay, so we're almost there. We're almost into this form. We have a negative in the front, so we want to get rid of that negative. Now, there's two ways you could do it. I could divide by -1, or I can multiply both sides by -1. So I'm going to do the multiplication because I think multiplication just tends to be a little easier for most people. So just remember to put both in brackets just so you don't turn it into a subtraction problem. So I'm going to put -1 in the front. I'm going to put -1 on this side as well to balance the equation. So we're multiplying this side by -1 and this side by -1. So -1 times -y is just going to leave us with y. And then I'm going to distribute the -1 from here to here and here to here. So the -1 times -y is going to turn that into positive x. So I'm not going to put the positive in there, but there's an invisible positive there. And then the -1 times the positive 3 is going to give us -3. So now we've gotten our goal. So now we have y equals x minus 3. And don't forget, this is really an invisible 1 in front of it. So we have y equals 1x minus 3. So in this case, b is -3, and then the m is +1. And again, just to remember, m is the slope when we start graphing the equation. So here's the form that we're like. Now the next thing I want to do is I want to show you guys how the graph, just a little reminder. So when you have a graph, let me zoom in on that a little bit. When we have a graph, you're going to set up a y-axis, and I always try to remind you guys that y is to the sky because it goes up, and then x is to the right, so and that's on the ground. So horizontal is x, y is vertical. So what I've done is I've done two lines on here. I've done the red line, which is a negative downhill slope, and then the I don't know if this is blue or purple, but this line is going uphill, and that's a positive slope. So we have a positive slope, so m is positive, and then x, for the red line, the slope is negative. I've put the y-intercept. The y-intercept is where this line crosses the y-axis, and in this case here, it's where it crosses the x-axis, is where it's the x-intercept. This is where we're going to graph our equation that we're working on. So I created a little area to work on. Okay, so back to our equation. So what we want to do for next is we want to find the x and the y intercept. So I'm going to do x-intercept. And then y-intercept. And I like to create these little boxes. All right, and the way I help people remember this is for the x and the y. For the x-intercept, we have to find x. For the known y. So we know that y is going to be 0. And then for the x, for the y-intercept, it's opposite. So we know what x is, but we have to find out what these empty boxes are. So for the y-intercept, we find y. For the known x. So again, we know what x is, we have to find the y. We know what y is, we have to find the x. Okay? So let's do the equations now. For the x-intercept, we're going to say y equals x minus 3. So in this case, we know that y equals 0. So we're going to put a 0 here. So 0 equals x minus 3, and we have to find the value for x. So the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to add 3 to both sides to get the x by itself. So 0 plus 3 is 0. I'm sorry, it's 3. Oops. And then the x is 3. So I'm going to put that back up here. So we have 3, 0. Okay. And then for the y-intercept, this one is a teeny bit more algebra. So y-intercept, so we know that the y is 0, but I'll put the formula in there again just so we're starting from the same. So again, we're going to go to y equals mx plus b. So again, it's positive 1, and then b is negative 3. So in this case, we know what x is, so we're looking for y, so we're going to leave the y, that's the unknown. Since we know x as being 0, I'm just going to put a 0 there, so 0 minus 3. So 0 minus 3 is negative 3. So we found what the y is. Okay, so now we have our two coordinates for our x and y intercept. So for the x-intercept, it's 3, 0, and then the y-intercept is 0, negative 3. Okay, so we've just identified our x and y intercept. I like using this grid here just in the beginning when I teach it, just so you guys understand that we're finding the empty boxes. And then a little reminder is when we're finding the x-intercept, we find x for the known y, and for the y-intercept, we find y for the known x. Okay, so I'm going to take out that graph that I did earlier. Okay. So again, here's our points. We have the 3 and then the 0 and then the 0 and negative 3. So I'm going to find each of those points. And I think I'll do it with a blue line. Why not? So I go over 3, 2, 3, and I'm on the 0 because this is the x-intercept. This is where it crosses the x-axis. And this is, again, obviously the y-axis. And then for the other point, it's 0, negative 3. So when we're graphing a linear equation, all you need to do is find 2 points. And once I find those 2 points, I can just connect the dots. So I'm just going to take something I have straight edge. There we go. I just want to emphasize that these two lines do go forever. So the slope on this is m equals positive 1. It's an uphill slope. And then the equation is y equals x minus 3. One of the things I want to point out is once you get a little more sophisticated in your algebra, once you take more advanced courses, people will say, the teachers will introduce this y equals mx plus b, and they'll say b is your as your y-intercept. So there, it already tells you, because you know that the x is 0 and then the y is going to be -3. So you'll hear that b is called already the y-intercept. So you really don't have to do all that extra step, but I just wanted to get you guys comfortable with this. So this is your y-intercept. And then this is the graph for that particular equation. And there you go.